90%. Why have you booked this episode, Loco? 90% of this episode was like Team A that you've never heard of, right? Never heard of them.
We have to do a play-in episode.
And then we don't have to.
Why not?
Could have just waited till the fucking main event, couldn't we? Like. Right, this is going to be episode 90 of Listen Loco. I'm just going to give everyone at the beginning of the show 2 warnings. Warning number 1 is I actually have just finished recording a video in CSGO. I know you're already thinking, like, I'm not here for CSGO. Shut the fuck up and listen, it's my show. So I've already just finished recording a video in CSGO, and I could just wait till after the show and then upload it and propagate it around the internet. But I'll make less clicks and less money from doing so. So even though this is a live show, during this show at some point, I will just stop talking for 1 minute. I know the end of the fucking world might happen because who the fuck else will be able to talk and say something interesting on this show, but we'll see if someone can manage. And during that 1 minute, I'll just upload it and make some money while I make money, because that's how I fucking do that shit, Inception level shit. But anyway, the other warning goes like this. We are going to be talking about the play-ins right now. So if you're like most of the people in the Western audience, if you want to learn about the play-ins, like if you're going to watch them and you want to know like who are these teams that you have no clue about from some of the other regions, hopefully we can give you some insight. Like our guest here is very specialized in knowledge, but he'll be able to give you some background in some of the leagues you don't watch. But just know going in, like we're not just going to be talking about the big names of Worlds and all your favorites and Fnatic and all those sorts of teams. So this is more of a specialized episode, but we'll see how it goes. So our guest for this one is someone who, did we actually have you on Listen Loco, or was it like the Worlds thing we did last year? Do you remember, Jensen?
We had him on for Listen Loco before MSI.
Oh, that's right. Okay. There we go. Yes, you're right. Oh, because obviously, yes, he was telling us about like Fengvu Buffalo or something, I think. So, like, the interesting thing is, like, Jensen Go, I won't make the same fucking joke about something about CSGO or like Jensen Team Liquid or whatever. So, and obviously, we know Loco can never secure the talents of Jensen from Team Liquid. So he'd never be on the show, would he? From fucking hell. Like, at this point in time, I reckon, like, I could get like Loco's own family on before Loco could on this show. Like, I don't know what his guest fucking booking's like at this point, but whatever. We'll let that go. Here's the one thing I've got to say, Jensen, is you are fucked up by having your like alias be whatever it is, the Jupiter Storm on Twitter. You should just have your alias be Jensen Go, because if anyone types in Jensen, they'll never ever find your alias. So it's a bit confusing. Do you actually still call yourself the Jupiter Storm?
Actually, I don't really call myself that. It started as my casting handle, and they forced me to shorten it to JStorm because they wanted it to be 2 syllables. But then when you put in JStorm, you actually end up like seeing all these rappers and stuff like that pop up. So it was very, it didn't really sound like what I wanted to be like. So I just swapped back to my actual name itself. And it so happens that Jensen is once again a very common name. And if you type in Jensen, once again you see 1 million people. I think it's a very common Danish surname, in fact, right? So that's why TL Jensen he just goes by his surname of Jensen. And there's a whole bunch of Jensens out there as well.
Well, there was also that part where he was literally like a massive piece of shit under the other alias he had and then got banned for like life. So, but no, you're right. Put that by the by. Just put that to one side. You're right. There is a Danish name. Although the only thing is, like, JStorm, I can see why you changed with that, because if you're going to be in your region, people might just think you're an LMS team or something. That sounds like a fucking LMS team. If someone started tomorrow, JStorm, like, but wouldn't be. So, right, here's the question is, and because I want to check here, but I'm almost certain I know the answer, right? It's interesting because on the one hand, all the people I know who follow LMS always complain that simultaneously they always complain that the league's not that good and that it's got loads of problems and that a lot of the teams are weak. But on the other hand, they get really triggered by the fact that Westerners who don't watch it whatsoever obviously like instantly dismiss all the teams. Like nowadays, because obviously people know even Flash Wolves and HQ, those teams don't have the same players that you remember from years ago. Like there is no Westor and Maple and these players aren't on the team. So people basically think of LMS as like, I know a lot of people think it shouldn't even be considered like any major region anymore. It should be like a minor region. What are your thoughts on that? Is that too far?
So firstly, most of the Western audience who I think gets exposed or who exposes you to this sort of opinions on Twitter are not like native Taiwanese and not like native to the fan base and stuff like that. There are people who had some association with Taiwan at one point of time and they kind of got interested in the LMS, or they decided to well, now this sounds like I'm flaming them, or they decided to support the LMS because it was cool or something like that.
Okay.
And as a result, they are always in this flux of associating their identity with these type of things. I mean, it comes with the package of being a fan and stuff like that, right? So it's not necessarily always logical. and they also succumb to the same biases in terms of perceiving the strengths and weaknesses of these players as somebody who's looking on things from the outside, who is unaware of the inner workings and problems that the teams are facing on the inside as well. And some small points about AHQ. Ziv is still on the roster. I think that has been the one constant point. It's just that the rest of the roster is kind of different, with the exception of Sarah, who is the support.
Okay, right. Let's start there then. In terms of teams, so for people who don't know, like the AHQ team. Actually, I guess that's not a playing team, is it? We can talk about maybe. I guess we don't have to have an order on this one. Let's just initially talk about that from the main event. Obviously, as you said, the main representative is AHQ. And as you said, the only player who really comes over from the older HQs, people might remember, is Ziv. Now, he as a player himself is someone I'd like to ask about, because basically, right, in a way, he deserves like a fucking mini Dade Award. You know what the Dade Award is, right, Jensen?
Yes.
Right, he deserves the mini Dade Award, because before every fucking Worlds I ever saw this guy playing, all the people I really trust in the LMS like analysis scene were like, you got to watch this guy, he's fucking sick. The LPL teams are all over him. He's so fucking good. I remember people telling me he was going to go like head to head with Smeb and stuff, you know, like. But I've got to say, when I watched those Worlds, I don't really feel like he made it. At least the player that was hyped. What is it? What has he been like in his career? How do you describe this player?
I think it's the contrast of styles that you see in the LMS. And when Ziv was playing and when he was really good, it will be contrasted against the likes of MMD. He'll be contrasted against the likes of teams that will follow the flash rule style, where you just sack top lane and you play hard for bot. And in those type of situations, if you got resources from your team, you would naturally look extremely, extremely good, because everyone else had to play 1v2 against you and your jungler. And on top of that, he was playing with some of the stronger mid and junglers who could afford to give him those resources. And thus, as a result, as somebody who's looking in from the outside, once again, he looks extremely good. I mean, that results in him being overrated, but that doesn't mean that he is bad or something like that. It's just that he was always a solid player. Was he ever one of the GOATs and stuff like that? In context of the LMS, yes. On a global scale, no.
Okay. In the AHQ team now, is he one of the stars? I mean, obviously solo lane strength's pretty big. Like, what is the AHQ team now like?
So the AHQ, the way that they play the game, when they find success, is very interesting, because AHQ used to be the more solo lane focused team, or rather they would play where they lose mid jungle prio, and then they would just go wherever the opponents didn't go. In the case of within the LMS, it's to the top lane, because everyone else went bot, with the exception of a few teams here and there. So it is interesting now, because they've kind of flipped their playstyle, and when they do well, it is because they are able to enable their bot lane to really push in, and then use that to control the neutral objectives, take the dragon, take the Rift Herald, and snowball the game from that point. And that reflects in his champion pool as well, where he's playing a lot more Gnar, a lot more Gangplank, which is a lot closer to what in EU, a lot closer to what Vizichachi is playing as compared to what you would see Bwipo play.
Okay. Right, give us, as I said before when I was setting up the premise for the region, like put it this way, Loco, I'm going to go ahead and assume you didn't watch any LMS this year.
No.
Like, I won't blame you.
I haven't watched any games. Well, one thing before Jensen, I guess our next question would be like, how does AHQ like match up in terms of like the other teams and other teams they're competing against? But one comment I made last episode when talking about LMS was because it's such a small region. And when you take the top tier off such a small region, when you take like a top percentage off a small sample size, that means so much. And they got pretty much rated by LPL in terms of getting all their top tier players taken away from Flash Wolves and even some of the coaching staff. Doesn't that leave LMS in like a terrible position? Because there just isn't that much talent and there just isn't that much people in that region.
So let's take a step back and we talk about the LMS as a whole, right?
Mm-hmm.
In the LMS, there's been this very big brain drain. I think it most clearly affected Flash Wolves, because that's where most of the stuff came from, right? The top teams in China right now are coached by Warhorse, coached by Stake, and Suning is coached by Fluidwind. All these three people used to be coaches, used to be part of staff of Flash Wolves, and the Flash Wolves support staff has mostly gone on an exodus towards China as well. AHQ was not touched as much, although they have had certain changes in terms of coaching staff. It's more of like some of their players. I think it was the jungler who went over, Mountain who went over, and I'm not sure where he's playing now. But Domo was still the coach for HQ, and they have had some form of stability over the last think from 2017 summer, from 2018 for the last 2 years so far. So in terms of this brain drain for the LMS, it definitely has hit some teams. We see that but the thing is that already at the point of time, at the end of 2017, we were seeing all these or you can even consider them fourth generational talent coming up from the second tier teams. From the ECS division. So all these B teams that these teams are having, the academy teams, they were paying off, and they're developing these talents, and they're now replacing the stronger players who have gone to the LMS. And the fact that all these coaches that can go from the LMS to the LPL shows that whatever infrastructure that they set up has been working so far, and there's some form of base knowledge and base understanding of the game for them to work on and work forwards with. So even in the case of AHQ, yes, the region as a whole has been affected by the brain drain, but AHQ has not been hit as hard by it as compared to the other teams.
What would you say? Like, this is obviously a very open-ended question, but by all means, give us whatever rant you want or whatever angle you want to take on it. Like, the two parts to the question is, one, like, since Loco said before, the top talent was taken away. Like, I know as someone who followed, first of all, even in Counter-Strike back in the day, there would always be like one decent team from like Singapore region or Southeast Asia generally that would be good. But most famously in Dota, Southeast Asia has always been good. There have always, particularly obviously you add in Malaysia, like it's a different setup than we have in League, but there would always be good teams and players from the region. So has actually LMS like replenished talent? Like, is it the fact that, to me in local, there's no big names because the big names moved on and we don't know who the big names are now? Are the people who replaced them, the players, like, for example, did some of the names that people might not even know as much, like 4-4, did they actually live up to their potential and really replace the great players like the Maples, the West Doors? Is the region actually still like stacked with talent but just maybe not known?
So is the region isn't stacked with talent, but because they have had solid infrastructure, they could transform like mediocre players into solid role fillers. But the problem is that where you lack talent, so you can have great role fillers, but the problem is that you lack the faker, you lack the key piece that these role fillers can kind of enable. And that's the reason why you see like if AHQ, they can say that we want to build around Ziv, although I did mention that they kind of play away from him and stuff like that. And J Team, they have Rest and they have Fofo, and these are two very good core pieces in which they can build around. Once again, that's to look at the macro picture. This is where my rant kind of comes in. So for those of you who don't know, in next year the LMS will no longer exist. The LMS will be combined with the LST to form what they call the PCS. I think it's called the Pacific Championship Series.
What's LST,
I don't know
by the way?
The ABC or whatever it's called, right? But the LMS will no longer exist in the entity that we know of it as of today. And whatever happens to the slots, I think there's lots of rumors going around. I'm not going to speculate too much on that. But there's a lot of factors looking at this over here, because this can be kind of a case study of where esports might be headed in the future. And this might, in terms of Southeast Asia being a microcosm of what's happening overall. And we see this happening not just for League of Legends and for Dota as well, but for Dota, Torrin mentioned that some of the teams from Southeast Asia used to be really good. But now this is becoming very extremely focused only in one country. So the Philippines is the country that is the big country in Southeast Asia that's really, really good at Dota 2 now. Like even the Malaysian team and stuff like that, they were good, I think like 4 or 5 years ago. And then somehow they just did well to finish, had a lucky bracket run to the lower bracket or something and finished like 6 or 7 and stuff like that. I'm not that familiar with Dota, but this is what I'm hearing from the Dota side of things, is that Dota is kind of dying across in Southeast Asia because the big things that are coming up in Southeast Asia right now are mobile games. So things like the Arena of Valor, I'm not sure if you've heard of those things, as well as the infamous game that...
Arena of Valor is just League of Legends, like, skinned by Tencent for mobile, right?
Yeah, and then there's the game called Mobile Legends. Then they had to add the Bang Bang at the end of it because Riot Games sued them and stuff like that, because they were copying the champions from League of Legends and stuff like that. So these are the really, really big games in Southeast Asia right now. And because of how accessible internet is in Southeast Asia itself, so like, I've told this story thousands of times where I'm in Vietnam, I cannot have electricity, I cannot have water, but I always have 4G internet. So internet is so accessible, and anybody who has a smartphone can play these games. It's fast, it's quick. You play them, and they're super big. It's like in Indonesia, which is another country in Southeast Asia. One of the players there, he's so famous to the point where you get like ministers wanting to shake his hand and stuff like that during election periods as to gain favor of the people. So this is where the region has been moving as a whole. And Taiwan,
What the fuck? The actual like politicians and this guy's like, "Well, you get off my dick! I'm trying to fucking be good at video games. I don't give a shit about your bullshit." What the fuck? This guy's bigger than like politicians.
You'll be surprised. You'll be surprised what politicians would do to seem cool and hip and appeal to young people nowadays.
Wait, they do that in North America too. Like Andrew Yang, he went on the H3 podcast, and he also went on Nika Higa's podcast also. Like politicians go on like YouTuber podcasts to like try to get to like the millennial
Be careful
generation.
saying that name again, Loco. You could get banned.
And he's a YouTuber.
Could get banned. Listen,
there's context.
Right?
There's context.
Fails.
They're gonna look at this and they're gonna see the context, Duncan.
So in Taiwan, the big game that has been coming up is mostly Arena of Valor, and I'm not sure what's going to be happening. Like Garena actually, this already was set into motion 2 years ago when Garena did the whole Arena of Valor League, and then people were starting to realize that there was more prize money in that than in the LMS itself. So there was actually some players who started to make the transition over from one game to another because they felt that this game. They looked at the viewership, they realized that they were competing with China and competing with all these other time slots in other regions because everybody in Asia is +7, +8, +9 GMT, and they felt that it's just better to move on to a different game. So there was a lot of movement in that area. Viewership numbers have been dropping, and for the LMS, for people who followed it very closely, they would remember there was one period of time where you could not find any LMS VODs because they had some exclusive streaming deal with some King Kong streaming platform, and that made the league super unwatchable for people because it has such a low discoverability. You search King Kong and you found like the movie and stuff like that. It was so hard to find and watch the LMS, and that kind of killed international viewing and any English exposure of the broadcast as a whole.
Okay. Wait, one question I had is I'm pretty sure it's Vietnam, but LST is the Vietnamese league, right?
No, LST is what used to be called the GPL.
Okay.
So Vietnam is not merging with LMS. So Vietnam is going to stay as the VCS, and they're doing very healthy. They're doing very well. So the joke is that the Pacific Championship Series, now they've claimed 2 lives. They're coming for OC and Japan next.
Okay.
Like you have to remember, Loco, the weird thing about that region is obviously GPL was the original league that even had all the Taiwanese teams in. And then what happened is because Taiwan was way better and had won worlds and stuff, split off and had their own league, which left everyone else in like the fucking Bane pit of like, well, good luck getting out of there. And in fact, the joke is back in the day, Vietnamese teams were exactly the type of teams everyone just farmed up like a motherfucker to get all those like 30-game win streaks. But then actually Vietnam themselves got their own league, right? So it's gradually like you've been building out and building out and building out. Where actually is the... Like, as I said earlier, obviously LMS its stock as a region has fallen and fallen and fallen, and now most people basically think it probably will never be a major region again, and it kind of like solves that problem that Worlds used to have, where you can only have 4 Pool 1 seeds, but there was 5 regions. I think that's kind of solved its own problem. But in contrast, where is Vietnam at? Like, obviously people have seen over the years the Gigabyte Marines and these other squads come up. Has Vietnam come closer to LMS as LMS has come down?
It's hard to say where the exact level is. LMS definitely has come down, and Vietnam definitely has come closer. But the fact is that the LMS has had infrastructure, like even all the way back from Taipei Assassins winning in 2012. The scene has seen a lot more infrastructure development, which is why they can see third generational talent being developed. You can see like proper organization. People know how to run teams and stuff like that. Whereas in Vietnam, between every split, is a flurry of like roster changes, and then you just see all these things coming through the rumor mill and stuff like that. And the ability to really develop talent from solo queue, which is I think is the one thing that's stopping Vietnam from really challenging for major region status, has not really been fully developed yet. Like there is a lot of people. I think the one of the fun facts I was told was that there are more that Vietnam is the only region in the world that's got more ranked games played than normal games. Every other server in the world has got more normal games played than ranked games, but Vietnam is unique in the fact that not only do they have a large player base, they play more ranked than normal games.
That actually sounds terrible, though, because I always think in League of Legends, I've said this before, Look, I don't know what you think. I always think the biggest problem League of Legends as a game has is that most average players don't actually use normals and ranked for what they're supposed to be for. And so you get the idiot who plays something he's never played before in his ranked game. You get the person who just, because obviously, you know, there's an extra bit of excitement if you play ranked, isn't it? If you win, you get the league points. But the point is, if people just did stuff, like if they weren't feeling it, if they were tilted and they just went and played normals, if they were want to learn new champ, go play normals. Because that's the part I've never understood. You know, the people where if you're playing in a ranked game, and then something goes wrong in the game and they like fuck the game up and you flame them and they're like, dude, I'm just playing a game for fun. It's like, get the fuck out. That's not what ranked's for. Ranked isn't for fun. Ranked is all about fucking grinding, destroying everyone else and getting those LP. Normals is where you go to play for fun, not just with your girlfriend. Anyway, that was a bit of a rant there.
So it's a 2-year-old information, but I don't think it should be incorrect nowadays. I don't see any other region growing, but from 2 years ago, Vietnam was the second largest region after China. I think like the only region that might have overtaken it is Europe, but Europe shouldn't have seen exponential growth, and Vietnam shouldn't have seen like exponential loss either. So I would still imagine Vietnam's the second biggest region.
So it's actually quite interesting because Vietnam is the only region that's not seen the big decline in PC gaming, despite the rise of mobile gaming. So it has continued to somewhat, you could argue that it's stagnated because the growth was not as big as it was before, but it's still kind of growing, but just not as much as before. And that is not consistent with what's happening in the rest of Southeast Asia as well, in Vietnam, where the rest of Southeast Asia, everybody is just moving over to ROV and Mobile Legends and stuff. So, but back to the question of how is the gap closing between Vietnam and LMS? Wait, well, I lost my train of thought with regards to that, but it was infrastructure, yes. So the LMS, they have been able to snowball all this infrastructure, whereas in Vietnam, I'm not sure if you guys know the story of Young Generation. This was the Seed 2 team from Vietnam. So everybody remembers the Gigabyte Marines that year, right? Mm-hmm. But this story, it just blows my mind sometimes when you think about it. Now you look at American teams and then or any professional organization today, and you think that the team needs a coach, they need gaming houses and all these kind of things to succeed. And Young Generation was a Vietnamese team, which is just 5 friends coming together, and they were just practicing in a LAN shop and they qualified for Worlds. That was the state of infrastructure in Vietnam at the point of time, where 5 friends just came together, they played at the LAN shop, they were good enough, they won the VCS. They didn't win, they finished second to Gigabyte Marines, and then they managed to qualify for Worlds after winning the regional qualifier.
I mean, there were actually like good players. I assume they were like challenger level players.
Yeah, there were a bunch of challenger level players.
Just when you said it like that, like, you know, and then 5 friends, it's like you made it sound like they were just playing some ranked games. Then they were like, oh, we've won. I think we've been promoted. What's that? We qualified for Worlds. And then they were like, one of them was like, but I've got to go for my dinner in like half an hour. And then some guy came out, because you know in LAN shops in Asia, for some reason, there's always food around there. Some guy just came out eating a hot, like, all right. And then they go, have you got a passport? He goes, yeah. He goes, you're in for Worlds. Like, they were obviously actually like challenger players. Were they known people though? Like was it kind of like a Rocks Tigers gamble where, you know, some known players went and then didn't have the infrastructure and made it, or were they completely fresh players to the top?
They were completely fresh players in terms of what the Vietnamese team was looking like, because the Vietnamese team was very influenced by the Saigon Jokers, which was one of the Garena sanctioned teams in the past. They brought in this Korean coach, Mr. Lee, who coached them in a very specific way, and all the teams that continued to dominate, they either came from 2 camps. They came from the SOFM team kind of camps, which is the teams from Hanoi. They were the northern Vietnamese teams, and then there was the southern Vietnamese teams that played and learned. I mean, this is not entirely accurate, but it's as simple as I can put it. And then there are these teams and players who went through Mr. Lee's training system, and then they come out of that, and these were the people kind of dominating the scene. And this is the group of people that just relatively kind of came out of nowhere and just won and made it to the World Championship in 2017. But that's where the state of infrastructure was, and I think that even like moving into the finals, so there is this question, right? Who is the best 2 teams in Vietnam? Gigabyte Marines now they're just called GAM eSports. They're no longer called Gigabyte Marines. So GAM eSports.
They've done a TSM. It's like, excuse me, sir, we're not called Team Solo Mid. TSM now, like, all right, mate, whatever, right?
So they were the first team by quite a large margin, and then the second place was between Team Flash as well as Loki eSports, who eventually became the winner. And Flash on paper had the much better roster, but much more balanced roster. They didn't win the finals because they were not able to sort out internal issues and stuff like that. I do know that this is a common thing among professional teams, but this is just so common in Vietnam that it's very indicative of where the infrastructure infrastructural development is at this point of time.
It's the way I just opened the stream just to check that everything was going okay. Immediately triggered by seeing that Loco still hasn't done what I told him to do, where you resize the boxes so that it's like 3 heads and a like nice square presentation. Hasn't done any of that, of course. Just like an absolute pleb. So as a result, Jensen's just a fucking small head down here with a massive background behind him, like fucking whole office. But whatever, we're used to that. Loco's bed just in the background with a dead body in it, as far as I can tell. Like, it looks like he's literally tried to sneak out of his apartment, but like if his roommates come in, they think he's sleeping. Like, probably plays a cassette player, like a fucking 80s movie or something. Like, just sneak out the window, guys. Like,
I like having I like being able to see full bodies, and what I did was try to size it so our heads are similar sizes.
Right, so my head's just twice the size of yours, is it? Is that what it's like in real life? Is it? Are you literally like a tiny little Asian boy? You're just like when I meet you in real life, is it like Indiana Jones? Are you the little fucking spider monkey that gets up on my back or something? What the fuck is this? It's ridiculous, mate. My head's like twice the size of yours. But anyway, whatever. I guess in some ways it works the way I metaphorically dominate the show, and larger than life character.
Well, Jensen, ignoring all that, how good is Gigabyte?
Taking it all into account.
Okay. How good is GAM in comparison to like the major region teams? Like, what can we expect from the Vietnamese teams?
I think it depends on. It's interesting that you phrase it that way. That you talk about what is the expectations of them, right? Because their biggest strength is that. I think because of the way that they play, it works for them as an underdog. Because people don't expect much of them, they become very irritating to prepare for. They play a very unique style. Let me set this up properly. They have 2 role swap players, and a flex player who's like flexing between 3 roles. Who I think played almost every single role within the team at this point of time, and is currently their substitute. So they are playing players who are playing out of role. So Slay, who used to be an AD carry, is playing support now. And Xin, who is the AD carry that they picked up, just plays mages, almost exclusively plays mages in the bot lane. It's a very strange team. It's a very strange playstyle. The mid laner is Kiaya, who used to be the top laner for them before they got Zeros. And he plays the mid lane like top lane. And he's like Renekton and Clad, which in the context of today's meta is not that strange. But the way that they set up around it, he plays mid lane like top lane. So most of the time in mid lane, when you push the wave in, you just want to push the wave and let it bounce, and then you kill the opponent mid lane on your freeze, right? For Gigabyte Marines, when they push the wave in, they try to stack it, and they want to dive you on that, and they don't care if your jungler is there. They play like top lane, I'm going to 100-0 you with the Renekton and some AP jungler, and there's nothing you can do about it. And sometimes the opponent jungler is there, and they get punished by that. But yet at the same time, their bot lane is like Vladimir, Yuumi, Vladimir Volibear, Heimerdinger, and stuff like that. So it's so strange, it's so weird to prepare for, where if you want to dedicate time to say that we must 2-0 this team, you end up losing precious practice time and figure out, okay, what is the meta supposed to be like? How do we beat the other teams in the group? So if Damwon comes into this group, it could be, they could crush them in terms of like pure skill. And I'll talk a little bit about Damwon later when we talk about the individual playing scrims. But in the context of Gigabyte Marines, it's a team you have to spend a lot of resources for, and you don't want to be spending resources for a team that you want to perceive as a free win. And even then, they could still surprise you with something that you just haven't really seen before, or their playstyle just catches you off guard. Zero question on the team after all.
Question is though, like the group that they've gotten at Worlds. So okay, on paper it looks all right at the moment because obviously they've got J Team, which is like another regional team and not exactly like a monster. And then FPX is from China, but everyone would expect them to win the group anyway. And at the moment we don't know who B is. Like, it could be Damwon, could be anyone, as you said. Like. Let me think. Actually, does anyone know who can it be aside from Damwon? What's the other possibility?
Damwon
Splyce.
That's a Damwon, yes.
Right. So obviously, this is probably the team that it's most essential that GAM have to try and beat if they want to get out. So how do you think they would actually match up against those two teams?
You mean J Team and beat Splyce or Damwon? Is it?
No.
How would either of these teams match up against the teams in this group and Group B?
Oof. Let me start by thinking about what's. Sorry, let me just recall.
Well, maybe tell us something about J Team first. Maybe that would make more sense.
J Team is so. I would say the most solo lane focused. They're the LMS team that I'm the least familiar with because my they've always had a very strong, strict Taiwanese only policy. So I've never really gotten very close to people on J Team itself. So I don't really know the inner workings of the team.
Wait, so
But
they
the
only
team that
hire
places a lot of
Taiwanese
focus-
coaches and Taiwanese players?
Yes.
Oh,
They
wow.
had a Taiwanese only policy towards that because it's relevant to the brand and stuff like that. It's part of the branding strategy. It's not a, I don't know, someone somewhere out there.
If people don't
already telling us
remember,
it's racist.
J Team is the team owned by like Jay Park or whatever the fuck that guy's name is. That what's his name?
Jay Cho.
I don't know the name of any of these fuckers. Just some guy who's a pop singer, right? Who's really famous in that country, right? May as well Jay Park. I don't
Jay
know
Park's
any of these
Korean,
fuckers, do I?
Thorin.
Yeah, whatever. It's all the same shit to me, isn't it?
So they were one of the teams who was very successful at developing this so-called new generation of talent and promoting them up. So you see these players, like Fofo, as well as Rest. I don't recall where Rest used to play, but Fofo was kind of like the centerpiece that J Team built around for a very long point of time. And Little V as well as Koala, they used to play for G-Rex, and then they were promoted, I think, in 2017 or 2018. I think it was 2017 summer in which they promoted into the LMS, and then now they're all friends with one another, so they ended up playing for the same team now. As to how good they are, I can't really tell, because this is a team that kind of solves the other teams in the games that I've seen them play. They look at how a team wants to play the game, and they just prevent them from achieving the win conditions. And they have solid solo lanes, and they win the game through those lanes, and they are able to facilitate what they want to do through those lanes through Fofo and Rest. There's no really one clear playstyle distinct feature that really stood out to me when I was watching J Team's games.
Mm-hmm.
But then again, this is really me not doing all that much watching of J Team's games.
Okay. Right, how do you think, maybe go team by team, J Team or GAM, pick one, how do you think they will do against the other teams in their group at Worlds?
I would still say that FPX is definitely favorites to make it out of their group. And whoever comes in second place, I think it really depends on their read of the meta game. If Damwon goes into the group, okay, let's just talk about Damwon, because I think that this is something that's a lot more interesting. And this is my first rant about this comment about Korean style of League of Legends, right? And people talk about Korean style being slow and stuff like that. If you look at the stats, Damwon Gaming, they're nothing but they're anything but slow. Their combined kills per minute, it's close to zero, is above 7, is above 0.7, as compared to SKT and Griffin, which is like 0.6, 0.5, something like that. They significantly take a lot more fights, but I think that they have I mean, this is me not being an LCK expert. This is just me doing
sure.
my cursory research on Damwon as a team that we might have to play in play-ins, right? Because I'm currently with Splyce. So the way that they play is they play very heavily for solo lanes, and they try to stack and dive on those solo lanes, which is very similar to what people used to do with like Jace and Elise, Renekton and Elise, which, speaking of which, Renekton and Elise seems to be very relevant at the moment. And they have this style of playstyle where they just throw CC and then they burst you straight away when they have a big wave stacking to you, and then you just fall insanely far behind, and they try to snowball you through those lanes. So it's not something that seems to be very complex, and I think at one point of time people were criticizing Damwon as well. So this is me borrowing on the Shoutcaster narrative, where they were not necessarily taking the right fights, but they were just grouping and they were showing up for fights, and they were winning those fights anyways. And I think that this type of team, they can be figured out if teams have enough time to really sit down and prepare for them. Especially when they can face up against, I think, like FPX should be able to deal with them. I don't really know about J Team, because I say that this is a team that kind of plays like the counterpunch, but a lot of the crutches that they rely on might just be where Damwon just hits them the hardest. So I really
How good is the top laner at J Team? Because obviously that's the main matchup if you play that one.
Ooh. It's hard for me to tell. I would say that he stands a chance. So I don't rate how good people are. I just look at it and say that, is this guy going to be a liability? In this case for J Team, they don't really have clear liabilities. So we really have to see what's the draft like, what's the read on the meta, and who is coming in, who's bringing what champions into play, and does somebody figure out something in solo queue that's a very strong counter pick that they can bait Damwon into. So everybody knows that Nuguri is going to play Vladimir, right? Mm-hmm. And is this guy going to try like a Cassiopeia or Ryze in the top lane? Ryze is something that people know is good at the Vladimir, but is he going to try like something like Cassiopeia, or I don't know, even stuff like Cho'Gath or something into that?
One thing very interesting about the Korean teams this year is all coached by extremely heavy-handed coaches. I think Goma and Kim Sung-soo, the Damwon coach, and then the Griffin coach, CB Max, are all very heavy-handed. They have a very specific idea on how they want the game to be played, and they kind of force it onto the players. A lot of times in other regions, due to lack of talent and also due to players just having a lot more say, you kind of are given pieces and you have to figure out what to do best with it. But in Korea, oftentimes you can pick and choose players, and you can bench even top tier players and get players of similar level or even slightly below. And Damwon coach Kim Sung-soo, he loves playing towards top side of the map, and he loves taking just like 55-45 fights and teaching players like you should be taking fights like this, and here like going over mechanical parts over and over again. Like so the previous teams he coached, I mean most notably IG when they won, King Zone, Samsung, and then there was that 1 year with Dignitas that was bad, but he coached for like 2 weeks and then he got kicked. So it really shows in Damwon's playstyle where they play towards top lane heavily and mid lane to a certain degree mid lane, and they're very open about taking a fight if they think it's slightly even better.
But in context of those three teams, where we set it up that all three teams, if Damwon does go into their group, then we have three teams that play very heavily towards the top side of the map and are very reliant on top mid and jungle skirmishing. So it's going to be a question of who comes out mechanically ahead, and this is not my expertise. You got to get someone like LS to really evaluate that, right? Sure. Like if you want me to criticize bot lanes and stuff like that, that would be more my area. That's something I'm more able to judge. But like the jungle top, what does 2v2s look like? I don't really have the expertise to really say that this team will come out ahead very clearly because of these reasons, and the best I can do is just borrow other people's narrators, but I don't really want to do that.
Even without like really knowing much about the two other teams, I'd be shocked if there's a top laner from these regions that can match up to Noguri. Like when Noguri is on form, like he's destroying Korean top laners. Like Noguri plus Canyon as a duo are destroying like Korean top jungles. I just can't imagine anyone from like minor regions coming in and being able to match up. One, they're never gonna get practice against players like that, and two, just like the regional difference is so much.
Yeah, but everyone said that before MSI, and that fucking Zeros guy did pretty well. Like he had a fucking few games where he popped off. He wasn't terrible.
Zeros is the top laner for Gigabyte Marines. Forget.
Yeah. So he's not a joke, mate.
And J Team, and this is where your argument does really, because the Taiwan scrims, they scrim with the Korean teams all the time, and they're going to get to scrim like with the LPL top laners, they scrim with the LMS top laners, sorry, with the LCK top laners. Like once again, I really don't know all that much about J Team because I'm not, I don't have any context or insight, so I don't know what their inner workings are like, or who they get to scrim, and what are the inside workings of the machine over there. So you might be right in the sense that Damwon, they might just exclusively scream Korean teams, or they might even have a B team system in which they do that. But I do know that they do scream LPL teams and stuff, so it wouldn't be too much of a stretch to say that J Team has had experience playing against these style teams. Because I know J Team for sure, they would have scrimmed a bunch of LPL teams and like EDG and stuff like that. They're very top side centric teams, top eSports as well. So the fact that you are in the Asian region and you can scrim on the Asian servers, you get an exposure to so many different playstyles. And there are teams like RNG, like FPX that play very heavily for mid to bot or bot for bot. And then you have teams like EDG and top esports that play more towards the top side of the map. Sometimes even exclusively for the top side of the map as well. So I wouldn't necessarily say that J Team would not be exposed to that type of playstyle.
I'll be hesitant on it, but it's just watching Noguri, like he's been an incredibly dominant laner. Like just their first 15 minutes, how that one does this seems so practiced, and I mean it is somewhat of an uninformed information because I don't watch J Team, I don't watch GAM, I can't know their exact power level. I don't even know who these top laners are, but it would just be shocking if they don't get blasted open. I
mean, in LCK, it might just be that this is, once again, right, this is a team that's doing something that other people are not really doing. And in the context of a tournament where so this is one thing that people don't realize, that when you play in Asian leagues, you play best of threes. So you play maybe on Wednesday, and then you play maybe on what's the LCK schedule like?
It's like 4 days a week, I think, isn't it?
It's
quite
4 days
lot.
a week, right? So you play once in the first half. So you play either Thursday, Friday, or is it Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, Saturdays? Something along those lines. You play once in the first half, and then you play once in the second half, and then you have an off day somewhere in between. I'm not sure if the Korean teams they still do the whole insane. We don't take off days. We scrim 3 blocks a day and stuff like that. But I do suppose that you have to take an off day somewhere in between. Your time to prepare for teams is going to be a lot less as compared to when you go into Worlds. You know that this is your groups, and you're going to have 3 weeks to prepare for these type of teams. So maybe Dortmund in that type of style, and the LCK, it's like I said, there's no real clear Korean style, and people just have very different approaches towards the game. It becomes a lot harder to prepare for that. Do I really want to try to beat one specific team, or do I want to prepare to make sure that my strategy is in place so that I can have a good shot? It's like the whole concept of that there's no wrong questions or the wrong answers kind of approach towards the game. Because if you play in the Asian leagues, that is the amount of time you have to prepare. You have 2 days and then you play. You have 2 days and then you play.
Fair point.
Right, another theme I wanted to ask about was obviously in the play-ins, the top pool 1 team from LMS is the Hong Kong Attitude team, HK Attitude, where I don't know most of these players. I know one player who people will know, which is the Korean player Crash. Obviously, we've seen him in the past play at Worlds from like rubbish fucking regions, and obviously years and years and years ago, he used to be on Longju and a bunch of teams back in Korea. And then they are actually coached, just as a piece of trivia, by Chowie, who's the Singaporean player who's played for fucking ever, literally. And I mean, kept going into that things. Well, maybe like only 2 years ago he retired or something. He kept going a long time trying to make it. And then Loco's going to go, it was a friend of mine. And then I knew him when I was in fucking Singapore. And then one time we played Dota together. And then he gave me boba tea. And then is there anything else that happened there, Loco's?
He is a former teammate of mine from Dota back in Singapore. It is an interesting piece of trivia. I don't know why you shit on it.
All right, just checking. Like, go on then. Tell us your story then.
We used to play Dota together when I lived in Singapore. We played on separate teams at first, and Chowie was much better than me. But as we played more and more so, like I got better and better. I was really young when I played Dota. It was like when I was like 14, 15, and that was like my first experience at like competitive level gaming. I played StarCraft before, but I was nowhere, like when I played StarCraft, I was in elementary school, so there was no way I was matching up. But in Singapore, I was at an age where I could spend significant amount of time. And like as Jensen mentioned before, like the Southern Eastern Asia area has really good Dota teams. So yeah, I mean, I did play together with him.
But that's like 10 years ago or something like that. But
Yeah.
just as an aside, because I don't, nobody is going to care about this. The Western audience, most of you guys just don't give a shit about this tiny little country called Singapore. But I'm from Singapore too, and I'm curious, like, what were you doing in Singapore? Like, I suppose you're studying there or something, right?
So
Or were you just there to play Dota with Chowie?
no, my dad's a general manager of a Korean national oil company, and he moved around a lot depending on where his job needed him to go. So the whole family followed him around.
Luckily, though, Loco didn't turn into one of those like spoiled kids from like a well-off family, you know, that has like a really bad attitude and just thinks that like, you know, everything in life's entitled to them to be theirs, you know, and they should just get everything and all the superiority and that they're above the rules. Because if that had happened, that'd have been a really tragic and cliched story for his life, wouldn't it? Luckily, none of that happened, Jensen. Just to clarify, none of that happened. Okay,
So back to HK, right? So this is an interesting story. Like, you guys remember Crash because he played in Worlds in 2017. The team that Crash was playing for, he was subbing in for Move because Move had visa issues and he couldn't make it to China itself.
Right.
So he was subbing in for Fenerbahce, and they knocked out one of the major region teams in order to qualify for that. Sorry, they didn't knock out one of the major region teams, but they beat one of the major region teams to finish as the first seed of their play-ins group, so that they didn't have to play a major region team in the best of 5. Here's the funny story. Here's the funny part. That major region team was the LMS's HKA.
Right. So that's probably how they knew him.
Yeah, so it's this like cycle of irony that's just come around, and he smited the Baron twice, stole the Baron away from them, forced them to have to play Fnatic in the best of 5, and now he's playing for them. And 3 of those 5 players who played for HK in 2017 are actually on the same are on this roster as well. So the mid laner and bot lane, Mission, Unified, and Kaiwing are all playing for HK at the moment. So 4 players from that playing group have kind of returned in 2019 for the playing stages of Worlds.
Okay.
And the question was, how good were they?
Yeah.
I think in comparison to playing regions, they should still be better than the rest of them. They should still be better than the rest of the playing region, than the rest of the playing teams as a whole. So this is, I'm not sure if I expressed my thoughts on this, but I still do think the LMS is a cut above the rest of the wildcard regions, and that kind of was implied when I said that they're still a cut above the VCS because of the infrastructure lead that they have over the VCS. And this is me saying that I think the VCS is the best performing wildcard region.
Okay.
And the results are quite self-evident as well. So in context of the play-ins, I don't think they should have much trouble finishing first in their group, even though they're going up against Loki. Loki might be able to give them some trouble, but I don't necessarily think that that's going to be the case. Same thing, the way I look at teams, does this team have liabilities? I don't really think HKS has got liabilities, especially at the play-in stage. Whereas Loki, they have this huge liability in the top lane called Honey. And when you see him play the domestic league, these guys are losing lane to everybody into the domestic league itself. So when you have this hole in the top lane, I don't really think you can.
Should rename him to fucking Honey Boo Boo. He's just a bunch of trash that everyone's trying to bring up in the game.
And maybe he wanted to become Huni.
Yeah, exactly. When you give him resources, it should be called giving him Skitty. Right, that's too fucking next level. No one will know the reference there, but whatever. Right, I've got a question. Right, Loco, have you ever met Crash? Were you friends with him in any way?
No, I haven't met Crash.
We need to know about this.
No.
Right, do you remember him as a player though, back when he used to play in Korea?
Not really. Honestly, he wasn't like a really big name, so nothing really stands out for me.
I'm not actually that surprised. I can realize a lot of the Koreans that didn't make it in LCK went to other regions. Obviously, LPL was littered with them, even in some of the lower teams. I'm not really that surprised, actually, that this guy's one of the people who went kind of as a nomad around the regions, though. Because to be fair, he was like an aggro jungler who played like the carry jungle champion. So if you're going to go in a region where they're not going to speak Korean, I think you want a jungler who's going to be like the carry type jungler. So should we expect to see that type of Crash, Jensen?
Oh, wait, can I add one trivia actually for that? So in terms of like Korean players moving over to other regions and why it's been happening so heavily for the non-minor regions, or like kind of the minor regions and the non-major regions, like NA in Europe, like after Lustboy kind of happened and then the other imports started flooding in, like the big teams could easily reach out to the top tier Koreans, like from NA in Europe and also China, obviously. But in Korea, like agencies started being a really big thing. Like people were like, oh man, people want to hire Koreans, so we should start agencies. So there's like in North America, there aren't that many agencies. Like I could name like the 2 or 3 that are the biggest and that hold most of the players. But in Korea, there's like several. There's like 7, and all they do is like they try to connect teams to all these like lower region, like the players that don't make it.
It's like a little cottage industry, basically. Like it's sprung up to sell these players who have if they're known at all. Like if you're an LCK, you can basically get a job in Turkish League, Vietnam, whatever country it might be. In fact, back in the day, it used to just basically be people's like brother or something, or uncle would be the one doing this. Because the joke back in the day was you could tell if someone was like an absolute noob in the West as like a general manager, if they were like came to you and you saw that they'd had a chat with that one guy who kept trying to sell every single person Nara Kyle, the guy who just played like Jace mid or something. Like I can't remember what champion it was, but there was like one guy, like a one trick that everyone kept trying to like sell to the West, because obviously people would get like a finder's fee, if you sell this player or whatever. So because the sad thing about that, I have to say, is I actually feel bad for those Koreans, because this is where people don't know the unglamorous side of being a Korean esports pro, which is because very, very likely to get as good as you had to get, even maybe before you turned pro, you probably had to give up a lot of your schoolwork. In fact, some of them just outright quit school to become semi-pro or pro in any level. The sad thing is, when they don't make it at LCK level, it's not like LCS where, like there's some players who quit LCS and just went and had a life, Some of them just went back to school, went back and got a job. The sad thing is, most of them, because they've kind of all in on esports and League of Legends specifically, they'll just keep playing. And so just as in StarCraft to this day, there are still players who are playing for tiny little European teams you'd have never heard of, but who were like championship players in the past. In the same way, if you go to a lot of the regions in League of Legends, people would be shocked. Like even the Japanese league has Korean players. Like that's how ridiculous. Like they're literally basically like the main import to every region in the world. So it's kind of like, on the one hand, it's cool that they get to have a career still, but I always feel so bad for the guys who were just grinding out in Turkey, who are basically like, the problem is it's the sort of person you almost want to take to one side and say like, unless you're really enjoying like this right now, it's never going to get better, mate. Like, you're probably never going to get into a top Korean team. Like, but you're probably never going to make it. Like, sorry, if this, like, the point is, if they can enjoy their everyday life, cool, do it. But if they still think that this is part of the dream of, making it, it's like you've kind of lost your chance, I'm afraid. It's very unlikely you'll make it back. Like, British Way, the examples like Crown, who really did come back from the wilderness, very, very rare. That is like so rare that ever happens.
There's like Snowflower, Snowflower is like one. There just isn't a lot, and Turkey's actually not that bad of a region because their like league is supreme from what I heard, and then you get paid so much in Turkey comparatively to the other minor regions. But yeah, like the players like that are playing in Japan or like other like Southern Eastern Asian leagues, I don't imagine they get paid pretty much anything.
Actually, I have no idea because I think the way that things in Turkey are set up, I mean, this is just like seeing the kind of bullshit that Turkish teams pull in scrims and stuff like that. Now that I'm in Europe, it actually makes me wonder how those Koreans are being treated there as well. Because I know the Turkish fans is extremely savage, and the way the players behave sometimes. Hearing some of these stories is just so insane. It's just so insane that the way that they treat these import players, even though it's the import players who's usually carrying their assets and stuff like that. Like
Sure.
I was with the academy team for Splyce for a period of time, and then we were scrimming these Turkish teams, and then they are telling us that we won. They start chatting in all chats saying that they want new Koreans and stuff like that because they were getting trashed so badly they wanted to cancel the scrim and stuff. So
Wow.
I sometimes wonder. You say that Turkey is a very good place, and I hear about these stories.
Well,
about
they pay well. I'm not saying it's a good place, but I'm saying they pay well.
Sure. Yeah, that goes right. If they do pay, because you're hearing all these stories about Turkey not paying players and stuff like that as well. But I do think that if you have an agency, they probably, I hope the agency does set you up with lawyers and stuff like that. That at least make sure that you get something out of these type of scenarios.
Sure.
Right.
That's actually one thing, in Korea, I always wondered about Loco. That also made me so suspicious. So, back in the StarCraft days, for people who don't know, even back, we're talking in like 2006, 2000, and that kind of era onwards, Koreans used to literally publish how much the salaries of the top players in StarCraft were. And so from that era on, the top players were all listed publicly as making like $300,000 a year, $500,000 a year. Like some of them were, I think the highest was maybe like $700,000, something crazy like that, right? One reason I always was a bit suspicious about how big esports actually was in Korea, because they always wanted to give off the perception it was huge, is you almost never, ever, ever, ever heard a story of a player actually having like legal battle against his team, or legal battle to get out of a contract, or any of that stuff. Like, that was just kind of like never even an option for people, as far as I can tell.
Well, there are like I wouldn't say legal battles, but there are like internal conflicts between StarCraft players and their teams. But like when Effort retired, and he wasn't happy with his contract, he said, I'm going to go back into studying. Like, I've already won, I beat Flash, like I've done my OSL finals, and I want to go back to studying. Later on, like years after he retired, like 10 years after, he was doing a drinking stream and he got drunk as fuck. And he just started saying, yeah, the CJ head coach was garbage. Like, he treated me like shit. Like, he's the reason I retired. He's the reason when I came back, I wasn't as good. Like, so after like they all retired and they started streaming, like the truth regarding some of the Korean teams and how they treated them came out. So yes, there weren't like big public legal battles, but when people go back or when people retire and they say they're studying, maybe that's not what happened.
Because that's still the area to this day that most people who are esports pros are the most naive. They act as though like to get any lawyer means you have to pay like a $10,000 retainer. Like, you don't. You can get like a top lawyer within the esports field. It might be like a few $100 for a consultation session for an hour. So if you actually have any kind of a problem, it doesn't matter that you might not actually pursue it. Maybe you just want think of the lawyer in that scenario like a doctor. You just go to him like, I've got this problem at the moment. I don't know what to do. Like, here's the situation. Within even a 1 hour session, they can probably tell you the basics of like, yeah, there's a case here, do you want to pursue it, in which case it costs this, or you haven't got a case at all, don't worry about it. But it's amazing how many pros, because I get it back in the day when people used to make $20,000 a year, but in the modern day where people are making hundreds and hundreds of thousands, sometimes millions, it's amazing like some of the younger pros who just don't even have that in their mind. Because I think if you're going to be a tall pro from day one, you want the proper contracts in place, you want to make sure people are treating you fair, you want to make sure you run down unpaid salaries, you don't want to let these things become a massive problem, especially not when you want to deal with it yourself, because the difference is if you're a young kid, maybe your manager can lie to you and trick you into thinking what he's doing is right, but the lawyer will just tell you, like, he has no legal precedent if he's doing something wrong, you know.
So for the younger players, they think the team has their best interests at heart, and they think the team is looking out for them as like number one, and the team is giving them money, the team is giving them a place to live, team is like providing them with a roster spot, like they think they're giving them everything, where the team has the team's best interests at heart, and the lawyer will actually have your best interest at heart. And it's really hard to explain that to like a 17 or an 18-year-old, and like the parent kind of has to do it, or like, and also like that's kind of the first person you become in contact with, like you're at a very, very impressionable age, and if the adult number one you come in contact with is offering you so many things, like why would you go out of your way to like get a lawyer when like, oh man, like they're just gonna take money away, and like I'm very young and very impressionable, and like I'm buying into this like esport thing.
That's why the dirtiest trick always in esports, it still works to this day to some degree, but just not with the massive players because they got so much money they understand now. But it was where what you happen is the person who's your coach now, that used to just be the role of manager, basically. And whoever your manager is, obviously he tries to have a personal bond with you as a player. And the problem is, the more successful you are at doing that, the more you get what you're talking about here, basically, Loco, where the person, because they have a strong bond to that manager, they think of it as like, I have a strong bond to my team care about me. And that's why I've always thought, like, that's the easiest scam in the book, because that guy can then convince that player to do a lot of things that if this was a sports environment, maybe the player would say, fuck that, I'm not being a softball, I'm not doing this sort of thing. And the thing that kills me about that the most is that, like, the most obvious example, whatever, you could have just muted your mic and said to her, like, I'm busy right now, or whatever, I guess you're streaming, so whatever. So, the most obvious example where that's a problem, though, for me, is that people think naively as pros, I am loyal to my team, I shouldn't go and take a different offer because my team needs me. Tell you what, if that team ever gets the chance to upgrade you, like if you're a mid laner and they can get Jensen, they won't have any loyalty to you whatsoever, mate. They'll just they'll dish you out instantly. They only use loyalty to keep you on their team. They use it as a one-way street. So I think pros in general is mad naive about that. That's one of those areas I do actually worry about. Like, these are young, impressionable people who don't have, like, in most scenarios, their parents know nothing about gaming, so they can't help you. So a lot of them are in situations where it's not that they're all going to be abused, but unfortunately, when the business interests are too close to where the player is, it's very, very easy to get caught up in that and get fucked over, basically. Even if it's just on a minor level like this, you were just naive and you trusted the wrong person. Anyway, jumping back into the thing, right? One area that's obviously an interesting detail people might not know, Jensen, is, as you said earlier, you work with Splyce. So technically, you can also tell us about the Splyce team and maybe some of the European teams. So Splyce has to go through the play-ins. What do you expect for the team going into this?
Oof. What do I expect for Splyce going through this? I mean, this is a loaded question, right? We come from a major region, we expect to make it out of play-ins. That's kind of...
Okay, what about this then? I'll make it more specific. Because here's the thing. Yeah, on paper, obviously, if people see all the names, they're going to say, well, I don't even need to watch the play, and Splyce definitely makes it through. But as maybe we've alluded to earlier, for me, one of the reasons why you will always get a lot of upsets in International Play-In League is if you're Splyce. So, okay, Splyce is in the group that has Isurus Gaming, which is the team from, like, wasn't it from, like, Israel or something ridiculous?
Latin America.
Sorry, yes, that's right. It's from Argentina or something, right? Let's have a look. Looks like it's players from, like, Chile and maybe one from Mexico and some other flag I don't recognize. So there's that team, and then the other team is the Detonation Focus Me, which is the Japanese team people might know that has a couple of Koreans. Right? In this scenario, obviously Splyce has never played these teams before. They don't know any of these teams. The teams are completely different continents. So the danger's there, right, is the fact that it's unknowns, and it's maybe even like, even if it's not a good style, it can be a style of play you've never played against. So is that like a concern for someone like you? Are you having to put people putting in mad hours studying these teams?
Yeah, we actually do, and that's part of what we have been doing, and I think it's been kind of like made public that Splyce is an extremely large coaching staff. In part, not necessarily entirely by design, but because of the acquisition of the Mad Lions roster and stuff like that. So we ended up with this massive coaching staff at the end of the day. But let's address the concerns a little bit more. And my take on it, so this is me trying to detach myself and take one step back, is that the way I think the way that Splyce plays is actually very good against the way that play-in teams tend to play, because this is the shoutcaster narrative that infuriates me so much, right? Is that, oh, Splyce plays slow, so if a team plays fast, maybe they can beat Splyce. And what does playing fast mean in League of Legends? If you look at the games that are being played, you play fast just because there is a lane that can be exploited, and when you can exploit the lane, then you can accelerate the pace of the game, because now you have a guy who's 0 and 3, and you just keep attacking the guy, and they're just losing objectives on whichever side of the map that this person ends up on. So in the context of fast, you don't just say that I'm going to play fast League of Legends and then like 6-pool them or something. You have to have a skill deficit in some lane, or have a strategy that results in you being able to create a lead in one lane in the first place. And the thing is that Splyce, I think Kelsey Moser had the best description about Splyce at the end of the day, and that the narrative about us being slow and stuff like that is not the key issue as to why we drop games and stuff like that. You can look at the analysis and say that, okay, we lost games to Ripple beating Vizichachi on the top lane in the Gauntlet. We lost games due to us getting solo queued 2v2 in the mid lane against teams like Mickey and stuff like that. But you haven't really seen this very idiotic shoutcast narrative come true. Like, oh, they played fast League of Legends against Splyce. No, they had better players in certain roles, and they used that to exploit advantages to get leads against us. And unless you can say the playing teams, they are able to get advantages through having better players in specific roles, then you have to show me and tell me that these are the better players and these are the teams that can beat them. If Gigabyte Marines was in play-ins and we have Gigabyte Marines in our group, then yes, you can make a case for that, because Zeros can look like a monster sometimes, and you can say that this is a player in which they can take leads through, and this is how you can get your so-called fast League of Legends.
Well, my critique would be in mid-game, I'm not sure if you guys are coached that way, but there's so many times where you guys don't do stuff and wait for certain item breaking points on Humanoid and Kabe and give up a lot of vision. And if a team is able to get an early game lead and you guys don't really do anything during that like item trial or until you guys get certain items and give up vision and give up control on the map, aren't you guys open to snowballing versus those teams?
Yeah, I wouldn't say that that's not a possibility. I wouldn't say that that's not a possibility. But then again, if somebody has a lead, is there a possibility of snowballing? Of course, that's a possibility of snowballing. That can happen with every single team. Are we perhaps more vulnerable to that because of certain tendencies? Yes, but this is hard for me to really answer in an abstract manner, because if you have a lead, can you get snowballed on? Yes, this applies to almost everybody.
Mm-hmm.
But then you have to look at the way that we tend to play the game, and is that good at preventing us from getting snowballed on as compared to other things, right?
I know
an
inactive team in mid
territory of like debating, oh, is this map set up better for people and stuff like that. I think it's going to bore the audience to no end if you're going to if it's better opens 041, 032, 050, or 72 and 36 on the map or something. I don't know.
An inactive team in mid-game, or go ahead.
The part I never understood was this, is like everyone who, like, here's the thing. I personally never used the fact that they were slow as like a diss to Splyce, or the fact that they were bad in the mid-game, because I mean, this is where I have a very different opinion of Veteran. Like, Veteran actually thinks that these players are better than I do in Splyce, and that they could do more, and they could fix all these problems and be a way better team. Like, I look at the team they have, and to me, I always think your effective playing style comes from the personnel of who you have in your team, not the other way around. You don't just sit down and go. It's not like Dan one sat down and went, you know what? All my teams are going to be about playing through the top lane. Oh, coincidentally, I happen to have Nagori. That's useful, because if I'd have had Sword, I'd have been in deep shit. No, you do it the other way around. You go, well, like, let's see how they have, right? Obviously, I'm going to play through top lane of this team, right? So in the same sense, you look at who Splyce has as a team. So Kobe is not like a fucking lane AD carry. He's not going to smash you 2v2. He's not going to get a million farm. So the job is, get him to his power spikes, get him to his items, get him to where he can fight. That's where he's really good. Then you look in the mid lane. Well, the meta that fucking Humanoid's been playing into is everyone plays like fucking Azir. If you're playing Azir, you're also not going to get going super early in the game. You're not just going to bang that guy's then. It's a pretty safe lane to some degree. And then the top lane, Vizichachi isn't getting all the resources. He isn't even trying to like snowball and hard carry every game. And then Cersei, if anything, this is actually why I always thought the mid-game part, it looks like a weakness because they don't do anything to win the game. But the reason why they've survived so many mid-games like that you're saying, Loco, without being proactive, but then won the game, is because Cersei isn't just doing nothing on the map. He might not be ganking 24/7, but he's going to fucking match whatever the other jungler does. He's a pretty smart jungler at reading the map, as far as I can tell. So if you put all those pieces together, I think the style kind of makes sense to me. It's like that's where the strengths and weaknesses lie, and they know how to play to their strengths, I think.
I mean, their strength is Kabe and Humanoid are incredibly good players, and Xerxes plus Humanoid are also good mid 2v2, so they get through early game a lot through that, or like mid just winning on its own, or then winning 2v2s, and they do nothing mid game until that item breaking point comes, and once that item breaking point comes, they're good about team fighting. But in that mid game, like, if the team is good enough and if they are proactive enough, they just keep putting Splyce in worse and worse positions, and they crack to the teams that are able to do that. So I mean, I think that's what I just saw in Europe. I saw G2 Fnatic consistently able to do that, and teams that did get decent leads on Splyce were able to use the mid game of them doing nothing to break them open, and the teams that weren't good enough to do like really break them open in mid game just crumbled onto their late game team fighting. So yeah, it's just mostly a question of, are teams proactive enough? Do they have good enough players where they can overpower Splyce in the early game and get enough done in the mid game where the late game team fighting doesn't come into effect, or they're so far behind where that's not even an issue anymore?
What is proactivity?
Proactivity.
What do you mean by being proactive?
You're the one who makes the play happen.
Yeah, willing to take fights, like willing to fight for vision, not willing to like run away and like give up certain parts of the map. And I think, I mean, I see it all the time. Like, there's certain item power points like you guys wait for. 3 items on Kabe. I think that's a huge one. If he's on 2 or if he's on 2.5, you guys actively avoid fights. And then once Kabe gets that 3rd item, once he finishes all his like crit build, then you guys are much more proactive about, oh, we're not going to give up vision here. So, I mean, yeah, that's just my read on Splyce.
Yeah, okay. I think that is a fair read. That is a fair read on them. But I don't see how it contributes. Sorry, but I mean, my original point is that in terms of the narrative, that the slow teams and fast teams and stuff like that, it doesn't really apply in this case.
Oh, by the way, I would agree with your general premise there. Like, first of all, yeah, the idea of just saying like it's like that's almost as stupid as the old joke of like just tilt them for the Koreans. It's like, well, that's yeah, you're right. If I could tilt a top Korean team, that would help me. But they're also the least tiltable team, and they're fucking way better than our team. So like, that's that was why that old meme became a meme, because it was the stupidest possible advice that you just tilt them. Like, that's the hardest thing to do. There's no just. That's like, why don't you just build yourself a pyramid size of the one in Giza? Then you'll have a tourist attraction in your country. It's like, no one can do that. It's not even physically, logistically possible with modern day technology. So along similar lines, I agree. Like, the idea that some bad team should just accelerate the game. Like, do people not understand how a solo queue game even works? If you're the worst player in the lane and you try to accelerate your lane, what do you think happens? You snowball yourself out of the game. You're just going to die over and over again and get fucking picked off, killed by the other laner. Like, you have to have, basically, you have to be the person with the power to choose the way the game goes by being the better player or having the resources. So I agree. The lesser teams, there's no logical reason why actually they should do very well against Splyce at all. Splyce actually stood up, I thought, this year very well against lesser teams generally, with the exception of that weird Rogue game. And even then, Rogue, by bringing in those players not at the very beginning, no one truly can know how good they were anyway. And they didn't actually maintain it after that, as it were. And on the other side of the equation, like I said, the whole angle of, oh, because they're doing nothing in the mid game, like, oh, that's where we're going to take advantage of them. Good luck taking advantage of Cersei. It's pretty fucking hard, actually. Like, a lot of people thought they had a big window in that mid game to take advantage. That's why I say I had an example on my show with Veteran. To me, like, they play like anti-League of Legends, because there's a term in soccer called anti-football, which basically just means like you try to shut the whole game down. Like, you don't want anyone to have passing lanes. You don't want loads of shots on goal for either teams. You just want to grind it out that way. It's like, it's almost like they do that in Splyce, but tell you what, they're fucking good at it. They're really effective at doing it. The only teams who really could beat them was G2 and Fnatic. That was it, basically. So whatever, you got to do what you got to do. A W's a W, right? That's all that matters.
We've touched on Dom 1, HK, and Splyce already, right? So that leaves us with Group A, which is Clutch Gaming's group. And so I actually think that, so when I did my initial tier listing, I kind of like just glanced over and just assumed that all the major regions should just be a lock to make it true. But after like looking at some of Clutch's games and stuff like that, I actually feel that this is a team.
He's going to predict they can get upset.
There's two ways to assess teams, right? There's reasons why a team will win, and there's reasons why a team will lose.
Yeah.
And Clutch Gaming has got very strong arguments in both categories.
They're very polarizing.
With Huni being a very good reason to say that Huni is going to smash everybody in the top lane, and Huni will hard carry Clutch 1v9, and they will definitely make it out planes. Yet at the same time, I always do the but what's happening on the other side of the map, and is this going to be Clutch's problem? And if Huni ends up being neutralized, they find some interesting draft and stuff like that. So even like in the Splyce lost to Rogue, I actually felt that a very big part of that was in terms of how we prepare for ban pick and stuff like that. So it comes down to how we prepare for opponents. And if people can get a good read of what they want to do, and they can find like within a specific meta things that they can do to stop Huni from absolutely snowballing up the game, and then they realize that, okay, but what's the rest of Clutch's map like? I don't know what time Terra time is, but it might just be time to feed the opponents and stuff like that.
Well, I do think one of the biggest problems Clutch is going to run into is mid jungle matching up to other mid jungles in the tournament. But one thing that's been very, very clear is when Huni's better than the other top laner, Huni just takes over the game, and it's really hard for the other team to stand against it because I know you don't like the term like they play fast, but they play fast around top lane. Like when they get a lead in top lane, they're very proactive about snowballing it, either through diving top or either through Huni roaming mid. Or
I mean, that is what he would describe as playing fast, by the way. If you've been keeping track of what he was saying, like that is what he describes as fast.
Yeah, well, they play fast around Huni. Once Huni gets the lead, they'll play fast. And yeah, I'm not sure how good Unicorns of Love top lane is, so that would be like my biggest matchup. Like if the Unicorns of Love top lane is good enough, and Clutch for a Worlds team doesn't have extremely strong mid and jungle, and they can kind of abuse them in mid and jungle, I can see Unicorns of Love giving them a lot of problems.
I mean, it's not just about Unicorns of Love, right? We have to talk about who they might possibly face in the best of 5. And I think like Armut and the Royal Youth team, I always give the Turkish team slack, but I think Royal Youth is actually a very balanced team this time around from Turkey. So this is the thing, right? Turkey and Fnatic and Brazil, they both drew Dumb1 in the group, and it might seem bad for them, but this is actually a good thing because now you finish second in the group, and you don't have to play Dumb1 in the best of 5.
Sure.
And you don't have to play Dumb1 in
the best spot to be in.
Yeah.
If you think you're good.
Is somebody who I think might be able to hold off Huni, and then this is where the rest of the map can kind of take over. And it's kind of interesting because now people would talk about CEO and whether he's able to match Damonte and stuff, but I think they're both. This is just an eye test and me not being a very experienced person at looking at mid laners and stuff. But I think that might be an area that they have problems in the best of 5. Low-key esports, you can say, Huni is going to smash Hani completely out of the water because Hani is easily the worst top laner coming into Worlds as a whole, and Huni can just exploit the heck out of him. I mean, I don't even count Mega as a team, so I'm not going to talk about them. But you have to once again look at the rest of the map, and you have to realize that this is a team that qualified over other teams in the VCS where they do play for top lane and all that kind of jazz as well. And if you look at the way Clutch plays, you can say that they play fast, but do they play? They're good at snowballing Huni, but what happens at the 15-minute point of the game? And you can kind of compare the way the game as compared to the way that Dumb1 plays, right? Where they have a very kind of similar setup in the early stage of the game. And in fact, I don't really think it's all that similar with the way that they play because Clutch, they don't necessarily play hard for top. I realized that they play for top in a very specific timing around the Rift Herald window where they go for 8-minute Drake and then they transition that into a top lane play. Whereas Dumb1, they actively just attack
early
top lane.
skirmishes top lane, and keep diving. Yeah.
So there's also significant differences in the way that they kind of play around top lane as well. And the way that Clutch Gaming is setting up for Huni at the moment is not really for him to 1v9. It's kind of a more coordinated plan across the board. And I think that against competition that can hit them in the bot lane, that can hit them in the mid lane, and especially mid jungle like you mentioned, we might see the Clutch Gaming plan fall apart.
Is Royal the team that would give Clutch the most problems out of all the potential second seeds?
So they can't get Unicorns or Mammoth within their group. I still do think that they should be first, or at worst case, they have to play a tiebreaker for first place within their group itself. From Group B, which is our group, there's Detonation, and if Detonation finishes second, that might I don't really know. I don't really know because it's like I said, you have to compare these style of things. But I do see scenarios in which I can make arguments for whichever second seed team in play-ins to kind of come out ahead of Clutch Gaming because of the way I evaluate teams. I feel that mid and bot lane is areas in which these teams can attack and they can get leads and they can kind of race you on the map.
If you have to pick one, what's like the nightmare matchup? If Clutch gets this team, this is like a nightmare.
Give me a second to think about it, because I'm going to think about between.
What about the Brazilian team, Flamengo?
Flamengo? Oof.
Because they have some players people all know, you know. They're Shrimp, they're BRTT, some names that people might know from the past.
I don't really think Flamengo is all that good. Okay. I don't really think Flamengo is all that good. So once again, I look at my criteria of do they have exploitable players? Mid lane is exploitable, bot lane is exploitable, and even in the left hand side category of who can really carry for the team, BRTT or Robo, they're solid. They're good at a plains level, but can they go up? Like especially now you're talking about your carry point is matching up against Huni. You don't really want that to be happening.
Okay.
So I don't really have high hopes for Flamengo if they do match up. But for Royal Youth, then in the case they use Armut to try to hold them off, and then they play through mid jungle to make something happen. That might happen, or the same thing could happen with Flamengo as well.
Okay,
sorry. So I'm all over the place.
That's all right.
I'll just say that. My final answer will be Royal Youth, I guess. But this is just punditry.
So for Splyce, obviously the two groups they can go into is B or D, right? They can go into the one with FPX and GAM and J Team, or they can go into D, which is the Team Liquid AHQ IG one. And I saw on Reddit that the coach of Splyce, Duke, who we've had on the show in the past, was trying to do the classic move that people always do, where it's like, instead of, the question nobody will ever answer in the history of esports, pretty much Loco, is like, well, who do you want to play out of the two teams that you could play next? And then everyone goes, but excuse me, little miss, I'm John Wayne and I don't give a damn who I play. It's like everyone has to try and fucking grandstand it, even if the question's like, who do you want to play next? Literal my sister's team, or do you want to play SK Telecom or Fake? And they're like, frankly, I don't give a damn. It's like, well, you obviously do, don't you, you fuck? It's just that the real reason they won't give you an answer, Loco, is because if they end up drawing SK Telecom, then everyone's going to be like, ooh, you said you didn't want to play them. Ooh, you're scared. It's like, well, obviously they're fucking scared. It's SK Telecom. Like, why are we all pretending? But anyway, for whatever reason, right, so Duke tried to do that way. He was sort of saying, like, I'd rather get put in Group B. Group D, rather. I think that Team Liquid's beatable. It's like, obviously you'd rather be in Group B, wouldn't you? Like, you'd rather be in the group where you can just fucking beat J Team and GAM and get out. Like, you're not beating IG and Team Liquid. Maybe you can beat one of them. Like, it's not reasonable to think you're going to beat both. But on the other side, I did laugh initially because I probably had to read that headline, the quote, about 10 times because I kept thinking, the fuck has this got to do with IG Duke? Like, why would he want Splyce in his group? That's a bit out of order. You're probably not even going to play. Why are you trash talking? And I realised it obviously wasn't actually that guy. It was the other Duke. So what do you think on this topic? Obviously, you can't give too much away, Jensen. What did you think of that? Trying to say that he wanted to go in the harder group.
I actually agree with this. I wouldn't necessarily say it's harder because you have to consider what the styles are, and I think like hardness and difficulty. Once again, that's a very abstract narrative, right? Like who's easier, who's harder. Sure. And even if you look at like Group B, I'm not going to say that by no means it's a difficult group, right? But there's 3 Asian champions. It's LMS number 1, it's Vietnam number 1, and it's China number 1 after all. And that is a group. Even if you talk about managing expectations and stuff like that, you go into the group, even if you make it out, it's like, yeah, you beat J Team, you beat Gigabyte Marines. We all thought you sucked anyway. Yeah. You've got no scalps.
You're supposed to come second in that
credits.
Group. Yeah.
You've got no credits to claim and stuff like that, and you only set yourself up for failure. Whereas in Group D, you come in as the underdogs, and there's always an advantage to being an underdog in the group in terms of how you want to prepare and how you want to prepare for the other people in your groups. And this is something that people don't realize as well, is that the way that the world's format is once again, you have to think about who you're playing against and how much time you have to prepare for these people. So stylistically, who are you going up against and what are they going to be trying to achieve? What are they going to be playing like? And who matches up better against who?
I'm sure that matters. It's good to be. There are advantages to being an underdog, but wouldn't you rather be a minor favorite or
yeah? But he's pulling a fucking young buck, isn't he? He's going like, but in a way, isn't it better that we have to play the good teams early? Because then if we beat them, it shows that we're really good and we'll probably win worlds anyway. It's like, listen, you're doing a dynamite job, you're earning that salary, but that's pure bullshit. Like that's part of the job of being a coach. So you have to understand. Like the coach has to come in and go, good news, guys. we're going over the trenches tomorrow. Some of us are going to be heroes and win medals. Like, you don't mention, like, the rest of you are going to be dead. Like, that's it. Like, that's like kind of the job of the general, isn't it? You got to make them believe it's possible.
I remember whenever we would lose inhibitors.
That's definitely my point.
Whenever we would lose inhibitors, Cloud Templar would be like, "Don't worry, now we have free farm in mid lane."
Yeah, he'd be like, exactly. Now we can just farm in our base and get to 6 items. This is brilliant for us. Yeah, this is even better, actually. I like this. I like how good it is. Like, yeah.
LS somewhere is typing, technically, if you lose an inhibitor, it is actually better. But anyways.
So I actually do think, like, even like the PR stuff aside, in terms of like setting expectations and things aside, I think like just stylistically, the way that the Group D plays might actually be better for us. In terms of the prep that we need to do, the things that we need to learn. So when you do coaching, the way that you have to approach these sort of prep is that you have a checklist of things that, okay, in order for us to beat a certain team, right, we need to achieve a certain checklist of things. And if you look at Group B, the checklist might be longer because you have to make sure that you yourself are in order. It doesn't matter if they're a weaker team. I think you guys had like the whole MMA analogy before. If they beat you stylistically, because now you have to change your style.
Yes.
It's not just about I need to work on just this uppercut or this jab, or I need to work on my spacing and my footwork and something like that. I need to entirely change my style. I need to go from playing a ground game to playing a striking game and stuff like that. And there's going to be so much more work in terms of filling out the checklist. So if you are looking at a team that might arguably have weaker opponents, because and I talked about this earlier as well, like Gigabyte Marines is so insane. It's so hard to prepare for them. And the way that we like to do things is we like to research people, we like to prepare well for them, so that we kind of know how to achieve our game plan of reaching whichever is scaling power points. If that's, of course, assuming that we do opt for such a strategy.
You know what I realized, Lauren? People have just gotten so good at being interviewed in general. Like, I remember in earlier seasons, whenever you would ask them questions, they would just answer honestly and, like, they wouldn't hold back. Like, do you remember infamously?
Well, it's like sports now. They just know, like, the PR answers to say.
Well, they do know PR answers, but they also can give interesting answers. Do you remember when, like Tabe, when he got interviewed, like, what do you think this Chinese team will play? He's like, well, I saw them play this in Scrim, so they're going to play this. And everyone's like, wait, what the fuck? Why are you saying this? And they're like, okay, let's say, like, those things get banned. Like, theoretically, well, they have this also prep. Like, coaches used to put foot in their mouth all the time. I mean, I personally did that all the time before I got better at being interviewed, and players also. But just in general, everyone in the scene is so much better.
Sure. I'll also even say, like, here's the thing. If we're going abstract, like Jensen tried to there, right, here's the angle that you'd sell your team on if you got put in Group D as to why it's better. It's like, first of all, guys, we've got a lot of prep material because it's Team Liquid, it's IG. We can even look at all their play against the other top teams in their regions. This is, like, acknowledged League of Legends that people care about. It's not like minor regions where the problem always, when you look at, like, GAM, is if you go and watch their domestic games, it's tough to know how good the team they're playing against is. Like, what resistance did they have? Did this guy that exploited them, is he actually good? Is he just shit? Like, it's hard to know where they stand up, whereas you know roughly what Cloud9's like. You obviously know what all the Chinese teams are like. The downside of that is this, though. And also, I'll even say, to be fair, IG and Team Liquid, like Team Liquid particularly, has a very regimented style that's fairly predictable. The problem is, they're also a pretty good fucking team. Like, that doesn't mean you just win. I'm even personally, the reason why I thought that was a bit interesting to me is I think Team Liquid is a better version of Splyce. So I'm amazed that he thought that was good, because to me, I look at that group, listen, AHQ, okay, should beat that team. Team Liquid's a better version of Splyce, and I think would be even better in the late game than Splyce. And then IG, they're going to tear that ass up, mate. Like, they've got all sorts of ways to make the game played fast. They've got advantages in every lane. So, like, I get it on one level why there's certain, like, you can make some sort of cases, but still, it's like the scenario of even if you know what someone's going to do, doesn't mean you can stop it always.
I mean, so the fact that Duke is going up there and saying these several things, it could just be that we see ourselves that we are the better version of Team Liquid. That could just be the possibility.
Yeah, he's just elite. Yeah, we get it. That's kind of what we were implying. Right, so okay then. Right. Let me think. Do you have any? Well, maybe just give us some other thoughts. And since if you work with Splyce, you must know the other European teams. So, what do you think of the chances of the other European teams?
Oh, more important. Well, let's go to a specific question. Do you think it was crazy of like us to call out Rekkles? Because in the other Reddit post, in our Reddit post for our last episode with Upset, we received a lot of flack for saying Fnatic isn't a top 5 team. Do you think like that is? What's your point of view on that? Or you did?
That's just Fnatic fans, man.
Bro, you're just not getting the drift of this episode. The whole time I've been trying to avoid this type of punditry, like who's better than who's top 5 and stuff like that. This is not something that I am really going to really try to give you an answer. But if you want to really say gun to my head,
like, here's the big problem. Like, Jensen, I'll just shade that in for you a second. The point that he's kind of making here is it's a fucking poison chalice when someone asks you who the better teams are, because nobody can know. Because you're trying to figure out, like, this team from Vietnam and this team from LMS and this team from NA, this team from China, right? And now I'm supposed to look at all their games, then in my brain know who's exactly better than all of the others in a list. Like, that's impossible. The stupid thing is, everyone would just accept it. If Papa Smithy wrote the exact same list Jensen did, but it said Papa Smithy, everyone would go, well, I didn't know actually this team was actually 9th. But if Jensen writes the same list, they're just going to go, I bet he's just overrated all the fucking, it's like people themselves aren't able to verify it. So I see what he means. In a way, it's a bit, aside from for fun, it's kind of a bit pointless. I agree with him, actually. I think generally when you do international competition, it's more about the matchup. Like, the ranking aspect's irrelevant. Like, for example, I've no doubt there's some team who, if I ranked them 1 to 16, would be like 15th. But if they have the right playing style, they have a shot against
14 or they could beat 12.
Yeah, they could beat some team that's way better than them. But like, as exactly like he said before. In fact, it was quite telling when he said earlier, basically, that maybe a team like GAM actually is a team that could have a chance against someone like Splyce. Maybe that is the sort of team that can make that fast style work, right? It doesn't mean they're anywhere close to them as a team, though.
Okay. And then we can
wait a minute. Here's what we're going to do. Just give us your thoughts on like G2 and Fnatic. Give us some thoughts. It doesn't have to be how good they are. Just give us your thoughts on how they'll do in the tournament. What do you think?
I think G2 is very interesting going to this tournament, because G2 in previous international tournaments, they have always come in as solvers of the meta. So they were the people who came in, they didn't have a very fixed playstyle. They looked at how people were playing, and then they would adapt and they would do better as the tournament would go along. And I think this is what I said about the way they played at Worlds last year, where they looked at the way RNG was playing and said that, yeah, this is how you break their chokehold bot lane, and then you can shift the attention to its solo lanes instead. So they've always kind of been the solvers towards the meta, and this is the first time I think G2 is coming in as kind of the setters of the meta, where everybody's saying that this is the favorites to win it all. And they're coming in, and everybody's going to be looking at the way they play, and they've been playing a much more up-tempo game where you just look at the combined kills per minute is much higher, and people like to. I don't really know if people really coach by shoutcaster analysis, but it might have some truth in that, where they say that people are playing, people are going for this type of fights. Maybe we should be playing this way as well. We just play skirmishing mid and junglers that want to go dive a specific lane or take these sort of fights. I mean, this is not a very accurate description of the way G2 plays, but I got lost in my train of thought over there. But my point is this is the first time G2 is coming in with everybody who has their eyes on them. So if they can start off strong in the first few weeks, I think Rekkles and Perks are extremely smart players, and they should be able to hold on to that. People adapt to them, and they should be able to understand those adaptations coming in, so they wouldn't have the same pitfalls as what the previous favorite of the previous Worlds RNG had, where they just stuck and they lived and died by Uzi in the bot lane.
Do you think there's any?
Worlds is played in 3 very clear stages. There's like the first week, the second week, and then playoffs, where you see the meta evolve throughout the tournament itself. And getting a hold of the meta game is very crucial to be able to win Worlds itself. So G2, I think they will do well week 1. Week 2 might be where we see them drop 1 game or 2. And by the time they come to playoffs, I think they will have it all in the back, and they should be ready to make a serious shot at the finals. But we can't really tell how they'll stack up against like SKT. So what their read on the meta is going to be.
Sure. So one thing I've been trying to do regarding G2 is think if they have any bust potential, because almost everyone we talk to is like, oh, G2 is the favorites. G2 is going to do so well. G2 is so well rounded. They have so much veterans. They have excellent players. They have good coaching. Like I also said, like they took a long break before going into the grind. Like they're really ready for Worlds. Do you think G2 has any bust potential? Like any kind of matchups that they might face in round debate? Maybe they don't even get first seed. Like Griffin C9 kills it, like, and they get second seed or something. Like, do you think they have any kind of potential? Like, let's say not making semis.
It could be that there's a little bit too much hubris. So this is you're asking me for the worst case scenario for G2, right? Paint you a world where G2 fails to finish first in their group, And this is where hubris can come into play, where they're just so sure and they have like bad scrims and stuff like that because they're like scrimming Western teams and stuff like that, and then they lose to Griffin. C9 gets a game off them, and then suddenly they're 1-2 down in the group. And then the second week, people start to understand what's supposed to be played, and they're still kind of like stuck on a certain idea or on a bad read on what the meta is supposed to be. And then they go down like playing any mid or something like that. Then Caps plays any mid in one game and they lose the third game and it's all over for them or something. That's how I can potentially see it happening for them. Which would be kind of similar to how they went out in previous best of one tournaments.
Right, what about on the Fnatic side though? Because by the way, just to quickly touch on what you just said there, like first of all, G2 themselves, as they did with the Fongfu Buffalo, they lost some weird games that everyone would have bet their house they would never lose. Secondly, it's best of ones. And the problem is, when you have Griffin and Cloud9 in your group, anyone could lose a best of one to those teams. Like, they're not bad enough to 100% win the game, are they? So I think people just don't understand. With this format, there aren't the kind of certainties that there are in other games, you know. Like if you go and look at like Dota or something, it's fucking hard to get knocked out like really early at TI if you're a top team. You get so many chances, such a sturdy format. In League, there's always going to be the chance. So listen, even if the chance was 10%, that means 1 out of 10 times G2, the favourite for Worlds, wouldn't get out of the group. So that's the problem. It might sound weird, gents, because it sounds like a crazy statement to make. But if you say to someone, you're a 90% favourite, in their brain, they sort of go, that's almost 100. I'm going to win. It's like, well, no, you still lose 1 out of 10 times. That's more often than it feels like, you know. So I just think that's a bit overblown. What about Fnatic, though? Because they're the one, obviously, that has a tough group already, and then no one knows who the fourth team is, and they're already potentially in a dogfight. So how does Fnatic do?
I'm not sure if you saw the Reddit post where Rekkles is playing mages and all that kind of stuff on his solo queue account on Reddit. But I think that this
What's he doing? Waiting to get a fucking time machine, go back a year and play like not a little bitch.
So this is, I mean, I know you rip on Rekkles a lot, and I would have joined in on you on ripping on Rekkles if this was 1 year ago. But I actually do think Rekkles has improved a lot as a player. And in the past, you can say that this matchup against Uzi is his nightmare matchup, and he never wins this matchup and stuff like that. And I have to agree that if 1 year ago, that's spot on, right? He used to play, as you would describe it, like a little bit. She just played like Tristana, Aspen, these kind of champions, and he just waited to reach 3 items and stuff like that,
of course,
and win team fights and stuff. But I do think like
sound familiar?
Somewhere. Sorry, I think it's
keep going.
It's makes that someplace you realize if he really wants to be a good AD carry, he needs to change up the way that he's preparing for things. Like at 2018 MSI, we could comment with as like EVOS, we just look at the way that they do the ban pick, and these are the champions they exclusively play in the bot lane, and we know that I can get a free pass on my bot lane by just drafting in a very specific way. But in 2019, in Season 9, I think he's in the middle of that. He's kind of changed up the way he's played the game quite a fair bit. We saw very strong performances on Lucian from him. He's picked up the Karma. At first, people are saying, "Oh, Rekkles is just throwing a tantrum about the state of AD carry. That's why he's playing Karma and stuff like that." But it turns out that it's actually pretty smart. That's why teams in the LPL started to play Karma as well, because you were hitting certain item timings, and it has to do with the. It is true that there is something to do with the state of AD carry as well. So I think that Rekkles he has kind of unlocked the in his brain, he said that if I really want to be a good AD carry, I need to start doing these things. I need to start examining the way that people play the game. And in 2017, the Asian AD carries and the Asian bot lanes were starting to understand these type of concepts already. But in the West, it took so long for people to realize that this is how bot lane is being played. Like, people were still stuck in the Forgiven era of like Lane Kingdom, like all you want to do is just push up into your opponent's face all the time and then just harass him whenever possible. Whereas there's this much bigger picture of how does the support play into the matchup, what type of matchup is it going to be, where is the position of the wave, how do you want to trade in these type of situations, and what resources, and the most important thing is what resources you need from the jungler. And that's one thing I felt that Western teams did not really understand as well. And you saw this manifest in the differences in bot lane through 2017 and through 2018. But I think 2019, Perks understands this. He's part of this so-called new age of AD carries, and Rekkles has understood this. He's forced himself to do it somewhere, somehow. Like, I actually think, like, him playing all this, like, Janna and, like, all those mages in 2018 and doing badly on it perhaps gave him the impetus to really force himself to learn.
To be fair, if you're going to be in a group with Teddy and Uzi, if you can do something unusual they're not going to do, if they're just going to play into the strong ADC, you may as well. Why not try and get an edge on it? Like, going head-to-head with them, already doesn't make sense. Like from like unless you really believe you can beat them, and the problem is, as people have seen in Rekkles' career, for whatever reason, these types of players are the ones he's had the mental block against for whatever reason. You know, who knows why that is. Now, you're sure you can get over that, but another angle is if Uzi is just going to play Lucian if it's available, why not try and play Mage?
And people lane flopped all the time, so why not play weird stuff? Like, that's also a solution.
I don't buy the mental block thing. I honestly don't buy the mental block thing. My analysis of it was that Rekkles was just not a Uziel.
He was just a worse player, wasn't he? Exactly. I personally, by the way, I always thought that angle was like, listen, I personally think Rekkles is afraid of Uzi, but I also think that's because just like Double Lift, he knows Uzi is better than him. So the problem is if you're used to always thinking I'm better than my region, and you usually are better than your region, and then you face a guy where every time you face him, it's like he's just way better than you. Yeah, you're not in your comfort zone. You're not used to playing in that scenario. Like, in fact, the other thing that people always forgot for my money was even Korean AD carries often in the past didn't play like Lane Kingdom style. Like they weren't given all the resources and just trying to smash the lane. They were more around like the mid game, etc. Exactly. So like actually, it was always Uzi and basically the Chinese AD carries that in theory could have given him trouble. So it's not even that big a diss really. But whatever. Yeah, go on.
I do think that in 2019 he has kind of like unlocked this next level of understanding of how to play the bot lane, and I do think that this would be a very interesting way. Like if you watch the pro view of the LPL finals and the way Uzi was playing, it's interesting because like Uzi's still innovating. Like, and how do you play Astro versus Xayah matchups? Like when everybody like when Tahm Kench has been nerfed again to this point, he's still playing like Astro Tahm Kench blind into various matchups, and he's still winning with those things. He like won both sides of the Astro Tahm Kench versus Xayah Khan. Most people will tell you that Xayah Khan wins the matchup.
Of course,
and just be better than them.
In the semifinals.
Yeah,
and you look at it, and there's just so much to learn from watching the
exactly. Just bring in fucking Reddit, and they'll just say like, "Well, if you're just better than them, just win on the bad match. Why don't you just win on bad matchups? Then you have more advantages in your team." But anyway, fuck this. Like the problem with this episode is like 90%. Why have you booked this episode, Loco? 90% of this episode was like Team A that you've never heard of, right? Never heard of them.
And we have to do a play-in episode.
And then we don't have to.
Why not?
Could have just waited till the fucking main event, couldn't we? Like I told you before, you're gonna have topics in mind. Like we were just all over the place. We didn't even do the groups. We just went separately by different teams. We were talking 1 minute here, and then all of a sudden we were like, "Oh shit, yeah, I knew you, Coach Splyce. What's they doing?" Then after that, after all that, we'd have we're gonna do episodes analysing the planes. Fucking hell, I don't even want to watch the planes.
Wait, what the fuck's wrong with planes?
And then everyone's gonna be. This is how I tell you how group scores.
Oh my god.
Everyone's gonna go, "Oh my god, NA's won a best of one. Are they amazing? Are they good? Wow, Asia. Why so quiet? Why so quiet? EU? Why so quiet? EU? What? Can't you handle what NA's doing?" And then all of a sudden, right? Then fucking Fnatic will win one game. I told you, Nemesis.
I think you're just overreacting. What the fuck?
I'm not. I'm fucking sick of shit episodes like this. So I'm not doing fucking Listen Loco for Worlds. So you know what?
What about
Jensen,
wait.
I go.
What the fuck? Okay.
That was a bit random.
Thank you to our gold Patreon supporters, Buttpounder420, Tobias Bernasconi, Icelandic C9 fan, and Texan Fiends ho ho ho. Thanks to all our Patreon supporters for making this happen.